can you set a reminder to not let me leave before talking about the evangelism class at the end of this?
Sure. You
Okay,
made a
perfect.
decision?
No, but kind of no. Well, at the end, I'll pitch the question to everyone. Okay, so we've been talking about the book of John. Last week, we spoke a little bit through the summary of everything. We started the 7 I am statements because those are super important moments. Let me see. Chapters 1 to 12. Yes. Yes. The 7 I am moments, we still have a pretty decent chunk of things, but I'm going to try to get through all of it today. The 7 I am statements, it was I am the bread of life, I am the light of the world, I am the gate, I am the good shepherd. Number 5 is I am the resurrection. Resurrection, 1 S or 2 S's? Yeah.
Wait.
What?
7 signs or?
Oh, no, the 7 I am statements. Sorry.
You got the I am.
It's resurrection and why did he use so many 7s, man? And the life, which I feel like I get confused reading these things. 11:25. The context here is, as we know, Lazarus has been dead at this point for a few days. Martha meets Jesus on the road. She says, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. There's this really beautifully tragic moment. What? I will zoom out. There's this beautifully tragic moment where she's quite upset, very humanly, that Jesus was not there. And so she says, if you were here, my brother would not have died. But then she adds, I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Good morning. So she believes something, but she doesn't seem to be exactly sure of what she believes. And Jesus doesn't comfort her in that moment with theology. He just makes this declaration, this declarative statement, which I think is really good. The last thing you want to do in a moment when someone is heartbroken that her brother had passed away, that is not the appropriate time to unleash the most theologically in-depth response to what's going on. The important thing here, though, is he's not even saying that he's going to cause the resurrection. He's saying, I am the resurrection, right? It's not that he gives life. He is life in and of itself. It's this very dense and theologically beautiful thing. One of the things I read was that he is the source of it. He's not the distributor of it. So all of life is wrapped in this person. And so there's this idea that we read through in the book of John that's like, even though they will die, which is this physical death that all of us are going to die, truly they will never die because we're going to live in eternity with him. There's this idea that our physical bodies will perish and we'll be given these new bodies to be able to live with him in eternity. The reason why this is so tense specifically here too is that, and the reason why I love this so much is just 2 verses later, 2 verses after this really big declarative moment, Jesus is weeping at the tomb over what happened. And so the one who just declared himself to be the resurrection of the life still has this moment of humanity where he is at the grave and he is crying for what has happened there. Jesus wept. That's the verse we all read about. It's the shortest verse in the Bible. My wife is texting me. The beauty of this, I think, is that in this moment, I think it goes much deeper than the fact that someone that he had known and was close to had died. I read a really good commentary a few years ago that I wish I could reference the author who said, at this moment, it seems like Jesus is not just weeping at the fact that Lazarus had died. He's not just weeping at the fact that there's pain in the family, but he's weeping at the idea that all of humanity is broken. This is a broken system and things were not supposed to be this way. If things had been in the garden good, if they had never eaten the fruit of the tree, we wouldn't have had to deal with these moments. So there's this really beautiful moment where Jesus, life himself, is weeping at the idea that all of existence has to mourn and suffer through these things. So there's a really beautiful human element that, not that we don't see from Jesus often, but it's beautiful that the one who makes this statement, it says, I am the life, also is able to weep over what happened just 2 verses later. This is really beautiful thing. And so Jesus wept is the shortest verse, but it's one of the most depth and richest verses to unpack there. Number 6, this is one of the good ones. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Again, same sort of idea here, the life. That is in John 14:6. He's making it clear that he is the pathway to the Father. He is the only way to the Father. At the Last Supper, Jesus is telling the disciples that he's going to be leaving. He's also telling them that they can't follow. Thomas asks a really genuine question. I think Thomas gets a lot of bad rap. I really like him. I like the questions he asks because they're very human. He says, Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way? How are we going to get to the place that you're going if we have no idea where you're going in the first place? That's a really good question. That's a really genuine thing. And the statement that Jesus gives is the answer. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. They were expecting like a map to be drawn out. Go here, turn here, follow this road. It's not an actual place that you're going apart from who Jesus. He is the path. He is the way that gets you in there. These images are really interesting. How are you? These images are really interesting because they kind of build off of each other, right? So the way, it's not like a direction, but it is a person that we follow. That is what we're doing. The truth is that the thing that is the most real about everything in life is Jesus himself. He's the most truthful thing that could ever happen. I had a conversation with Josh Harris this week, and we were talking about what is real in the universe. What is the reality around us? And he goes, I think God is the reality around us. Like he is. And I'm like, Josh, I was trying to have like a fun conversation and you took it way too deep, way too quickly. But he's not wrong. That really, he is the truth. The most real thing, the most honest thing in the world is Jesus. And then the life. It echoes the previous, but it also echoes the prologue. In him was life. And so the way gets you to the Father. The truth shows you what's real, and life is what you find when you arrive there. That is what we're going to get out of this moment. In terms of like the difficulty, there's the statement that he makes that causes a lot of not division, but like strife for people, where he says, no one comes to the Father except through me. That's a very exclusive statement. It might be the most exclusive statement in the gospel narratives. So John is simultaneously giving this huge scope, right, in John 3, for God so loved the world, which is this very all-inclusive thing, and he's also making it clear that it is a very exclusive way to get in. It's only through Jesus that we're able to do that. So when we see that, the understanding is that the door is wide open, but there's only one door. There's only one door to get through. Open that all people could walk in, but there's not multiple doors in. We have to get in through the, oh my God, I keep hearing little footsteps, and I'm like, what is this behind me? And then, yes.
Thomas, it was asking Jesus, how could we know the way?
Yeah.
Thomas was thinking on a physical pathway, while Jesus was on a spiritual pathway that he couldn't understand exactly what was going on.
Yes. Yeah, you see it. I think it's also in Matthew, where, is it Matthew or Mark? Where Jesus is going, where I'm going, you can't come. And Peter's like, what do you mean? Like, of course we're going to follow you. And Jesus' response is fine. They're thinking a physical place. He's like, you literally can't follow me. You can't go to the place that I'm going. It's not there in their brain. It's so physical that they're saying, we're going to follow. Yes, we can. If you go over the boat, over the lake, we'll go over the lake. If you're going to go up the mountain, we'll go up the mountain. And he's like, it's not like a physical place, you know? And so again, there's a really cool humanity where you see that these guys, and what I love about the gospel accounts when they write this, they're not writing the disciples as these like theologically brilliant. They were normal people who also couldn't comprehend what was going on. And let's be super honest, right? If we were sitting around Jesus and he says, hey, where I'm going, you can't come, your only thought would be physical. They have no understanding of what's about to happen. They don't know that this guy's going to die and then resurrect. And so it makes sense that all these questions are very human because they're viewing this reality. And up until that moment, they had no idea that this guy was, I mean, Jesus is not giving his plan out to them prior. They're experiencing this in real time. Even when he goes on to die, there's that moment where after like a few, they're like, well, I guess we should go back to doing our job. Let's go fish again. Like they didn't have this understanding of what would actually happen. And so again, it's funny for us because we know the full story. So we go, that's such a silly question. We would have asked the same thing. We had no way of understanding what would have happened. So we got to be honest when we read it. We know more than they do because we are 2,000 years after. If we were in the same place with them, we would be asking the same questions and being like, I want to go where you're going. Like it's not how it works. The last statement is, I am the true vine. I am the true vine, still in the upper room, right? So right before the crucifixion, this is the last statement. This is the only one that expresses this exclusivity It's shared only to the disciples, not to the crowds. All of these 6 were public declarations. This one's very intimate. It's reserved for a few people, and he knows that he's about to die, and he's telling them how to survive without him being physically present. You know, the word abide here, meno, appears 10 times in 15 verses, repeatedly over and over. John is hammering this word in repeatedly. In the Bible, when something is hammered repeatedly, it usually means this is a significant thing. You know, you're not going to reuse the same word over and over unless it means something. And so a branch doesn't produce fruit by trying, it produces fruit by staying attached. So it's not going to theoretically produce fruit. It has to stay adhered. The sap flows, the life comes to the connection, the fruit appears. That's a result of being part of the vine. Jesus is reframing all of what they would have understood from like a spiritual formation perspective. It's not about necessarily doing more, but it's about being connected to the right source. You have to make sure that you're connected to the source. That is the only way that these things happen. Quite literally, like when the moment you cut a vine off of a tree, it begins to wither and die. Jesus is saying, be connected to the vine, you know? What I love about this, though, is that this is like the last, at least in the book of John, this is like the last imagery that Jesus gives before the cross that is neither a command nor a warning. He is openly inviting them to participate in this closeness and being close. After 6 very, very public declarations of who he is to the world, I think it's very cool that the final I am is about who he is specifically to them. And in our case, who he is to us. He is this vine that we should stay close to. And so the invitation here is very intimate. What he's saying is, come close to me, stay close to me. As long as you do that, you're going to be okay. Which, again, for these guys, they're not fully understanding that he's not going to physically be around them. And even for us, our understanding is that we're not necessarily physically close to Jesus, but there is a way for us to spiritually stay as close and as tethered to the vine as we can be. And so I know some people have like these ways where they sort of like dig through these. I pulled this from one of the internet sources. It says the 7 statements kind of have a theme. They move from provision to revelation to access to protection to victory over death to ultimate reality to intimate connection. And they say that it's not like a random thing. But I would just say this is one of those things where like these are 7 independently wonderful statements. When we put them together, we can pull a lot out of them. And we're not looking at like a list of metaphors. We're looking at a list of phrases used by Jesus, by this very real person. And in these 7 statements, he's giving us all that we really should be able to ponder through to get what we need to understand what we're a part of believing. If you really sit with these 7 statements and you repeatedly just meditate on them, it'll give you all that you need to be able to continue to grow in your faith. Which is, you know, our faith is so interesting because it is simple, but it is quite complicated. If you spent the rest of your life saying, I'm just going to really make sense of these 7 things, you're going to be in a good spot. All of the other things will make sense as you do this. And so let's learn, let's keep digging deep, but let's never ignore that sometimes these simple, seemingly simple statements are much more profound and much more powerful. I don't know if I will die and still fully understand how important these 7 things are. And so let's not think that just because there's 7 statements, like they're not this big deal. These are very significant things that John documents that Jesus is saying. Any questions on that section? I love smart classes. Oh, dang it. I don't love smart classes. All right, what do you have?
I was just wondering, so when you were speaking about like Lazarus and like if things went right in the garden, so knowing like the tree of life was also in there.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that would have been like the reward if they were like obedient to what God was saying, and we wouldn't have to deal with that.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that people will argue about it. I think the most simplistic way, like in the garden, there was the tree of life there. We read about the tree of life like in Revelation 2, it'll 22, it'll be in the new Eden or whatever. The one tree that we're not supposed to eat from. You know what I mean? And so, Pastor Patrick, how would you explain it? I think there's a term for it. I don't remember. The idea that like we were, the garden was built for us to be able to ideally cohabitate it with the Father forever. You know what I mean? in terms of like the nuanced details there, they get a little bit complex, but I think the idea is Jesus is fully understanding that what the original plan was that we're taught of didn't work. And so the effects of that have rippled into everything. And so imagine being Jesus, being a part of creation, being intimately involved in all the details of the Garden of Eden. You build this beautiful place with all of the beautiful things that is meant to be amazing at all times. The very humans you create don't do what you've told them to do. Because of that, the whole system starts to shatter, and you're watching people that you love, that you were part of actively creating, dying, and you're like, this is not what I would have wanted. So there's this very like deep understanding of like Jesus is a human, so he has feelings and emotions, but he is also God, and he fully is, again, like he built something, and he's watching creation suffer because of their consequences. And he doesn't just flip a switch and be like, let's fix this. There's a plan to make sense of this, but it's so difficult. You know what I mean? The way someone explained to me once was like, when your kid does something silly, you're sad as like a parent. Like you understand the pain of it. You also get upset and you weep over what they do because you don't want them to have to suffer through those things. So I'd like to imagine then, yes, Jesus is upset because that is someone that was very close to him. But there's also this understanding of like, this isn't the way things could have been. And one day it won't be this way. But from now until then, we're going to have to deal with all of these, bad things and people dying and all that stuff. Yeah.
So in the new garden, like we'll be able to eat from the tree of life?
Can I answer that one? So the idea of the tree of life, it's not really developed in it's not fully explained in the gospel.
Yeah.
However, the same author is going to write 4 books after this one: 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, and the final book, the book of Revelation. In the book of Revelation, the tree of life will be mentioned. Now, having said that, though, the idea of the tree of life, it's basically the restoration of paradise. But in order to get a full idea of what the tree of life really meant, same approach when we're going to go through Revelation. To understand the book of Revelation, following the principle that the best commentary for the Bible is the Bible itself, you will need an understanding the preceding 65 books of the Bible.
Yeah.
Now, what is the tree of life? I believe it's an actual tree that we're going to be taking
You said
part
apple
of.
tree?
An actual.
Oh, I think apple tree.
Not
Apple tree
not
sounds
an
cool.
apple tree. We don't know what fruit it was.
I like it.
Some will say, now there's views concerning the tree of life. I think it's an actual tree that
Like
we're
a
going to
physical tree.
It's
Like
a physical
yeah,
tree.
yeah.
Now, are we going to be taking it in order for, we're already redeemed. We will enjoy the fruits of that tree, not for our life's sake, but for pleasure's sake, because we are redeemed not by the tree, but we are redeemed by the blood of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
However, the tree of life, it's I guess it's a symbol of God's being in fellowship with God. We're able to partake in things that was originally intended for us. We can't partake of that right now in the present. However, that's a reward for the believers to enjoy later on. Now, having said that, though, that's not the only privilege we're going to be enjoying in the new earth, the new Jerusalem, the new creation. Perfect union with Him, perfect fellowship with Him, perfect fellowship with all believers from all of history, all of that.
Yep.
So I'm like, yeah. Do you agree, Pastor Mariano? It's not fully developed in the Gospel of John, but he will mention it in Revelation.
In Revelation, it becomes
Yeah.
a big thing.
Yeah.
Because in Revelation, he has a lot of imagery that parallels Genesis 1 and 2, which is one of my favorite things to go back on. When he talks about the place that we will go to, it is almost always referencing the place that we were supposed to be a part of in like a bigger. So it's like, here's this garden place, and we're going to this big city place. And then the center of a garden was a tree, and the center of this big city is going to be a tree. So it's a really beautiful parallel back and forth. But again, you wouldn't unpack all of that from the book of John. It requires additional reading.
Yeah.
And even with the additional reading, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not like a super solid thing that we can be like, this is absolutely exactly how it's going to work. We have a pretty good idea, but it's not one of those things where I'd say it's like a con. I mean, the reason why there's so much discourse around it is because it's like, explain just enough to read it in a way where you're like, this is probably what it is, but there's enough ambiguity in some of like the apocalyptic revelation writing that some people are like, maybe it's not a tree. They're wrong, but like that, there's at least room for those things, you know? I love when people are wrong.
Basically, too, like the bird of sin, that's why he walked it. Like he saw like where, I mean, he's God, so he knows like I guess he saw ahead, like that's why like they live forever.
What do you mean?
Like when he took the tree, like at the birthday was in happening. So when he basically took the cherubim at the.
Oh yeah, there's that moment where he's like, well, now that they know the difference between good and evil, let's not let them eat from the tree of life. Otherwise, they're going to become like us. Knowing good and evil and being able to have. Yeah. So it was a very intentional divide where he's like, no longer will we, and that's why we die. You know what I mean? That's over. Okay. Back to the book of John.
I'm glad, because what you don't want to do, you don't want to make the Bible say more than what it says.
Yeah.
But you don't want to make it say less than what it says either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because some people don't take I'll give you an example. The story of Abraham who was visited by the 3 visitors. If you read too much into the text, it doesn't really say it. They'll read communion, the Last Supper into it.
Yeah.
I think that's unfair. You know what I mean? So don't let the text imply more or less than what it says.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and it's good, especially because, like, again, the book of John is so different than the other 3. Sometimes you have to be aware that, like, the 3 gospels sometimes will all be read together, but John works really good when you include all of John's other writings together and you get to piece something in there. Yeah. Okay, let's speak to a few things here. John is really cool because he includes a lot of intimate details that no one else includes in the Bible. And I think it's some of the most intimate moments that Jesus has. Let me hit through some of the Book of Glory moments. A lot of these statements up here you're going to see might be intertwined in between some of these. And again, like I said, I am just over summarizing for the sake of class. So I'm not hitting every big idea, but I'm hitting the ones that I think are the most significant. In chapter 13, we read about the foot washing, which is such a beautifully profound moment. John does not include the institution of communion, but he does spend a lot of time talking about the foot washing, which is really interesting. Jesus takes the role of the lowest servant in this moment, and he's able to instruct that for us to be high, we have to be low. The new commandment is that we should love one another as I have loved you. So Jesus, being the highest of the high, becomes the lowest of the low in that moment, and he instructs us to go and do the same thing. Foot washing, I think we have to really acknowledge, is the sort of thing that, like, you don't want to do. People were not wearing closed-toed shoes at the time, so their feet were dirty and yucky. And the fact that Jesus was able to do it is amazing. What does Richard Foster say? He calls it the way of the towel? I forget what the terminology is, but like, we have to be people who are willing to serve the way that Jesus was with this towel and clean people's feet and do the job that no one wants to do. That's what we are instructed to do. In chapter 14, there's this quote. He says, do not let your heart be troubled, which is such an amazingly wonderful line. Not even just a line, it's kind of a command. He's not suggesting it, he's saying it. Do not let your heart be troubled. What Jesus does is he announces his departure, but he also announces that the Holy Spirit will be coming to help. This is where the I am the way, the truth, and the life passage slots in. And this is also where he says, anyone who has seen the Father, who has seen me, has seen the Father. So it is this very, very, okay, again, this is a very pastorally nice conversation he's having. He's making like divine identity claims in here. He's making very theologically profound statements, which again, I don't know that the disciples would have understood this as he's saying it. In hindsight, these are really big statements he's making. And again, he's telling us, do not be troubled. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. The Holy Spirit is coming. In chapter 15, it is that whole true line idea, the true vine idea that we had mentioned previously. It's a big statement. It's like the central metaphor of that chapter. The branch does not produce by trying harder. It produces by being connected. And this also includes that one passage that people misuse all the time, which is that the world will hate you for following him. Okay, we have to really, I don't have time to unpack that statement. What I want to say is this: just because someone doesn't like you does not mean you're doing the right thing. We have to be very careful about that. You can be a jerk and the world will hate you. You don't get to be like, Jesus said they're going to hate me. No. They hate you because you're a jerk, okay? The world will hate you when you are doing the right things, you know, and they go against that. But I've definitely had friends who are like rude to people or mean to people, and they're like, I must be doing what Jesus wants because people are upset at me for it. It's a very poor reading, okay? It's not how you do it. Again, you have to be very honest. I had a friend a former friend who had a video that went very viral on the internet where it was like 45 minutes talking very negatively about Catholic people, which, you know, those are like our brothers and sisters in the faith. And in some of his comments, he really would be like, you guys are so mad at me that I know that I must be doing exactly what God wants me to do, because he said the world would hate me for it. And I was like, you're just a bad person. You know what I mean? That's really why we don't like you. You're just really mean, you know? And so please, I don't want to unpack that too much, but okay. Chapter 16, the Spirit. We have this beautiful moment about the Spirit, and ultimately this whole grief moment. Jesus tells them very simply, it's better that he goes, because when he goes, the Spirit will come. The Spirit cannot come until he leaves. And he gives them the idea that their grief will become joy, which again, guys, they are like, what are you talking about? What grief? And they're not aware of what's happening, what's coming. He also uses that birth pain metaphor, the idea that pain produces new life, and the idea that you can get through the pain knowing that at the end of it, there's going to be this reward for it. And then in chapter 17, there's what we'd call the high priestly prayer. Jesus prays out loud for his disciples. This is a really beautiful moment. He's praying out loud for his disciples and for everyone who will believe through the message that they're going to share, which includes all of us in this room. That's a very beautiful thing to read it, that is a prayer that transcends time and is relevant to us here. And the unity that he prays for becomes the strategy, what he is hoping that happens, that the church will be united. And as we are united, that will be the evidence to the people around us that what we believe is real. The way that we love one another, the way that we interact with one another, that's going to be the very thing that shows people who we are. I think sometimes we get too caught up in the idea of how do we prove to the world that we are Christians. We prove to the world that we are Christians by loving one another well, by doing a good job inside of the church. And what we do inside of the church bleeds outside of the church. Dietrich Bonhoeffer has this quote where he says that the church is the training grounds for what we do. What we have to do outside of the world, we first practice in here, and it gives us the confidence to take that outwards. So if you're like, well, I want to love my neighbor who believes a different religion than I believe, good. First start loving by the people who believe the same thing that you believe. If you can't love the people who are on the same page as you, it'd be much harder to love the people who don't agree with you, okay? So all of that to say, if you walk into church service today and you have beef with someone, squash it. Like, go and fix that, because the way that people are going to see who we are and what we believe is by how we take care of ourselves internally, and that love will then bleed outwards of that. The Lord knows that one of the most beautiful things that would happen is if in the chaos of the world and in the brokenness, people would say, man, but the Christian people really love each other a lot. Imagine if we didn't have to fight amongst one another all the time. Which again is so funny, because you would think that because we believe the same thing, we would agree on more things, but it's like, you're too Pentecostal, you're too Calvinist, you're too Baptist. Internally, we want to fight each other. And I'm like, guys, we don't have to start more issues, you know? There are enough issues to deal with. Let's love each other in the basic things. Any questions on that section? Again, I know these are very broad summaries.
We are church.
Yes.
Where we go to worship is just the building.
Yes. Yeah.
So whatever we do in our walk, our words, our worship, everything, our life is a sermon to
Yeah.
every individual.
Yep.
When they see us, they will understand that person is a Christianity. You cannot see Christianity.
Yep.
Your life.
Yep.
Is an example of
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing. I love what we believe. It's so good. I love it so much. Okay. Okay. The passion, the resurrection. I'm going to make a claim here. It's a very extreme claim. This is a personal claim. Okay. I think John has the best narrative for the passion and resurrection. I really do. I think the way he writes it, correct me if I'm wrong here, Pastor Patrick, it is not, he frames all of it not as a defeat, but as like a slow walk to glory, if that makes sense. When you read John's narrative, it is framing it all as a triumph and not as much as like a tragedy. Like, he is writing this beautiful thing that even the details he includes, they give insight in a way where you're like, oh, this was a sad thing, but in the grand scheme of it, it wasn't a sad thing. This was a planned thing. This was something that was already determined to happen. There are a few details that he includes that I think are very intentional, that I believe add some emphasis. So let me give you some, let me show you some moments, right? These are broad ideas that happen, right? So one of the things I love is Jesus's control over. When Jesus is getting arrested, it's interesting because he has that moment where he goes, "Who are you looking for? I am he," which is, again, very theologically bold thing to do. But the soldiers kind of fall backwards and they're shocked because John writes Jesus not as a victim. He writes him as the one who is orchestrating the things that are happening. He is aware of what's happening. He is not out of control. He is fully in control of all of this. I think it was maybe Judah Smith or one of the guys who said that you have to remember that the cross that Jesus was nailed to was made by using wood from a tree that Jesus knew was going to exist there in the first place. Like, he's very much in tune of all of the, you know what I mean? Like, the people who arrested Jesus were people that he allowed to exist in the first place. So we're looking at this whole thing from the perspective of like, oh no, Jesus was out of control. They were bullying him. Jesus is orchestrating all of these details, and he is at any moment able to just pull the strings and things happen. So frame this not as, oh, he's a victim. No, he's a victor, that he is getting through this bad part into victory. There's a part in Pilate. Pilate's interrogation here is so beautiful. How do you spell interrogation? It's 2 R's. Guys, I really get messed up. Maybe because English is my second language. Whenever there's 2 letters. This is the longest and most theologically rich portion of the interrogation that we don't see. Pilate asks this really interesting, there's this moment that there's like this what is truth moment that is asked while standing in front of truth himself. Like, it's a very, again, I don't have time to unpack this. I want to get this. In the Gospel of John, Jesus carries his own cross. Again, I'm not saying that he's not saying that someone helped him, but what he's framing there in that story, what he's picturing is that the king was carrying the very thing that was going to be used to kill him. He is there in that moment. This is a fire one. It is finished is one of those lines that when we read it, you can read it as a sad thing. It is not a sad thing. That's a victorious thing. He's saying the work is complete. The debt has been paid. All of it is finished. Someone a few years ago was like, oh my God, it's so sad that those were his last words. Like, he was like, oh, my life is finished. He's like, no. He was not saying like, my life is finished. He was saying, now from this moment forward, none of you guys are going to have to deal with any of this ever again. Like, the work that I came to do is finished. Yeah.
One of the churches in town for at the Easter time had on their billboard, Jesus said, it is finished, not I am finished.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, what a beautiful thing. That's exactly it. Because you can read this in a sad way and go, oh, Jesus said it's finished. His life is over. No, this is a very victorious moment. This is like done. The plan, the scheme of the enemy is done. It's over. From this moment, I have won in its entirety. It is, it's a commercial term that is, I think someone explained it, it's a commercial term stamped on paid in full receipts. Like, it's absolutely done. Like, when you finish paying off your house and you get the notice from the mortgage company, it's complete. That is what's happening. Like, it is complete in its entirety, which should change the way that we live. We really should live with this as a very important foundational thing. There's a pastor, not that I necessarily like his preaching, but I really love the analogy he used. It was Pastor John Gray, where he was talking about how we don't recognize how significant this statement is, because he says it is finished, it is fully paid off, and yet we keep living as if we have to earn our salvation when you couldn't earn it. And the analogy he used was like, it's as if the mortgage company sends you your letter that the house is paid for, and the next month you reach out and you go, can I pay again? Like, I got so used to paying, do you want me to send you money? He's like, you're done. There's nothing. You're good. It's fully paid off. And he said a lot of us believe that it's finished, but we're still trying to pay as if we owe something. We owe nothing. None of it is owed. It is completely finished. What an amazing moment.
The Telestai.
Yeah, the Telestai. What does Telestai mean?
It is finished.
That is literally what it translates.
Yeah,
Okay.
but there's at least 7 views from what I remember with John. One is the sacrificial view, right? The
Yeah.
sacrifice is complete. The payment,
Yeah.
it's fulfilled.
Fulfilled and
Uh,
canceled.
The one for the slave, your debt is paid off.
Mhm.
You're not free to go. That's only 3. I know there's at least.
There's a bunch of them. Yeah. Tom?
A battle cry kind of.
It could be.
Just finishing victorious.
Yeah.
That's one too.
The beauty of our English language fails the depths of what the original text is trying to say. Like, that's why I think it's important. If you're reading these, you're like, how did they know that? We don't know this because we know Greek. You can find these things, like dig through them and you'll see some more meaning. Mhm. Yeah.
Because you studied Greek and you read the text in Greek, does it hit different?
No, for me, like what I said, right? The Greek was helpful. Our English language is very good. Sometimes I feel like we study Greek for the wow factor. It's not like when you study Greek, it's like a one-for-one word-for-word correspondence. You need to see the relationship between these words, how it's used in the sentence. That's really what's more important.
Yeah.
The error when you study Greek, you take a word, right, and then you're going to look at the possible meanings, how it's used throughout Scripture. What some people do, they'll try to superimpose what it meant. You know what I mean? Because just because the same word is used in a certain passage, it doesn't mean that's used throughout. You're going to get nuances, but you can trust our English languages. Let me just put it that way. I mean, it's a great study. Do I use it? How do you? I'll be honest. You know what I mean? But then again, I'm not a language man.
Beautiful language.
Yeah.
Remember, our English translations are very, very, very good.
Yep.
There's still some other things that if you dig in deeper, you'll find the beautiful things.
What you can do though is look at the education to study multiple translation, major translation.
Yeah. No. Although a lot of them kind of are like very
Similar.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah,
like
you can.
between the NIV, ESV, and
ESV,
yeah, they're all almost
Translations, like you said, it's like the same thing in their font.
yeah.
As long as the word, they can use it like worded different. but
Yeah.
The mission.
Yep.
the same.
The idea is going to be exactly the same thing with a little extra comma here, an extra word there. Yeah. A few more just important things. Mary Magdalene at the tomb. There's the first witness to the resurrection as a woman. John pays attention to that and he highlights that. Again, I think we talked about it with Luke when Pastor Patrick was talking. It is really cool that they are acknowledging the significance of women in ministry, and they're not. It would have been very easy to be like, I was the first man there. It's not what he writes. He says, look who was at the tomb first. Doubting Thomas is beautiful because this is, I'm going to quote this, the highest Christological confession in the gospel. It is such an amazingly vulnerable moment from the most skeptical disciple who he is then making this claim, my Lord, my God. Like, that is a very high affirmation in that moment from the guy who's like, I don't believe it until I see the holes in your hand. Again, all of us are going to doubt. The beauty of Thomas is that he also doubted. The beauty is that he also then goes on to acknowledge Jesus for who he is. And then there's the breakfast at the beach. I think it's one of the funniest, most beautiful moments in the Bible for many reasons. Jesus reinstates Peter 3 times there, which is significant. He mirrors Peter's 3 denials. I love that those guys are fishing and looking for fish and they can't catch it. And Jesus says, hey, throw your nets on the other side. And then they catch all these fish. And then the best part is literally this is one of my favorite details. You can read it. They get to the beach and the same thing that they were looking for, that Jesus is already cooking the fish. So he already has the thing that they were looking for. And he said, hey, just come and eat. So it's like this beautiful moment because they're like, we got to go get fish to eat. And not only does he provide the fish for them in the boat, by the time they get there, he's like, there's already cooked fish. And then there's a little line that's so sweet where he goes, hey, come bring some of those fish here. So he allows them to be, if you really overthink it, it's this moment as if like Jesus is able to do all the things. Jesus is able to provide for all the things. The things that you're able to bring to the table, he's providing for already. He still asks you to give him and put some of that stuff in. So we get to be a part of what he is doing, even though he's the one who's providing in the first place. So from a very foundational level, he has brought all the pieces to the table. It's very cute that he says, hey, come and bring some of your fish here, as if that's not the fish that you only have because of him in the first place. You know, so there's this really intimate, beautiful moment. Huh? He still does that. This is a fun one. Like genuinely, go read. I think it's John 21. It's fun because it seems like a simple story, but there's a lot of really good details there to pull from.
The best is when it says Peter dove into the sea.
Yes. Well, you have to remember, Peter obviously is holding quite a bit of guilt from having denied him. And when he realizes it's Jesus, he goes and just leaps into the thing. I was reading a commentary from, there's this guy, Henry, I got to get his name because he is a theologian, but he also has, I got to get his name, but he has very good insight on Greek nautical history. And so he goes, the boat was like still maybe almost as fast as swimming, but like the desperation is what matters here. Like the idea that like he was so excited that it was Jesus that he jumps in, but he goes, you know, the boat would have only taken maybe like a few seconds longer to get to the shore. But I guess the point there's a lot less about like our reading of that shouldn't be like, oh my God, swimming was faster. It's like, no, he was desperate. He was desperate to go swim to Jesus. He was so excited. Yeah. He would get out there and do the thing, which is again the beauty about this. And this again, dig this one for fun. Like Peter's the one who jumps into the water to swim to Jesus. Peter's also the one who walked on water. So there's this really fascinating little thing there. All of this to say, this is a real funny one. It's a really, every once in a while, you read through the Gospels and there's just a section you're like, that's a really cute section. I love all the pieces that are happening. Breakfast on the beach is a great, very human moment. But correct. And we are just 10 feet behind you dry in the boat. You know what I mean? Yeah. You're like, I got to get him. And we're like, I don't know what's going on.
I don't know what's but the fish thing, like when he calls them like, I'm gonna make you fishermen of men. Or like something like that, right?
Mhm.
Isn't that right?
Fish of men.
So when he like tells them like you can still bring your fish, like a disciple moment, kind of. You know what I'm saying? I know it's probably literal to the text, but I don't know. That's kind of like
Fish
I
of-
just like interpreted.
What do you mean?
So like
I think I get what you're saying.
yeah. Like,
Yes,
he's
yes.
saying, like,
Fisher of men is quite literally like an evangelistic bring people in, but it's also the idea that you can bring in like, I will provide the things and you can still come in and bring a big part of it is like you have to, okay, Jesus, we get to be the hands and feet of Jesus. But have to be like, you've heard about like the people in like the Middle East who just get visions of
Yes.
Jesus, right? So it's like, Jesus can just reach people by himself. We get to be a part of the process. He lets us be a part of it, which is really cool. And so, yes, in that way, I can see the parallel between those. But I have like 5 minutes. So let me get this. I have 8 minutes, 7 minutes. Okay. One.
Your question. Too.
I'm close. I am close, and there's going to be questions. Okay. Here's a really big thing. John is the only gospel writer who includes a very explicit reason for why he wrote the book. He explicitly writes it. Now, Jesus did many signs and wonders in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. Okay, so one out of the gate, we know he is not including everything. He's making that very clear. And then he says this, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, that he is the Son of God, and that by believing you will have life in his name. That is the purpose of the book of John. He's making it very clear that if you read this, right? And the beauty of it is that he's saying, by what he included, you may believe that he is the Christ, he is the Son of God, and that by believing you may love in his name. The beauty of this is that when you read what John is saying, right? And listen, he's not negating the other gospels. What he's saying is what he wrote in these 21 chapters, by just reading this, you have more than enough to convince you of these three things. You do not have to overcomplicate it, which is why oftentimes when people are like, hey, I'm a brand new believer, what should I read? Always I point them right to the book of John. Read the Gospels, but read John first and then read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, because he is explicitly saying you don't even need to cross-reference the other ones. Just read this. This is the purpose of this book. The beauty is when you read this in John chapter 20, you realize that he very intentionally included what he included to make this point doable without overwhelming you with context. And so if you're like, yeah, but I need more, you don't need, like, this is enough. There's enough here. Tom, what's going on? You're going to keep looking at the screen.
I thought you were at the end.
No, there's one more. There's John 21. Now, can I be honest? I don't know why he just didn't put that in John 21. That would have been a great ender. He's like, I wrote this so that you may believe. By the way, Jesus showed up to his disciples. That is like the next part of the, yeah. Where you're like, okay. But again, beautiful moment here where you have like he appears to the 7 disciples, Jesus and Peter, they have this moment, and then Jesus and the beloved apostle. This is the breakfast on the beach moment. One thing that is funny that I think is really beautiful is that like there is that really funny rivalry between Peter and John. It's very playful, but you see it in moments like this where I'm like, this wasn't necessary. Peter turns to the disciple whom Jesus loved, which is John, because John refers to him as a disciple whom Jesus loved, which is funny. Following them, the one who also leaned back against him in the supper and said, Lord, who's that that's going to betray you? When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, Lord, what about this man? Jesus said, if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is it to you? You follow me. Did he have to include that? No, but it's really funny. I love that he's like, by the way, I'm the one who Jesus loved. I was the one who was laying up against him during the dinner. And then Peter, is it also in John where he says that he ran to the tomb faster?
Yes.
Yeah, he's like, the one whom Jesus loved and Peter were running to the tomb. Peter got there second. And you're like, that wasn't necessary. You didn't have to put that in there. And so, yeah. Wait, go back.
If you realize, John was writing in detail because he never wanted to say I do.
Yeah.
The one who also had lead on.
Yes.
He was speaking up about himself.
Yep.
But he was not,
in first person.
When
Yep.
you have to say, it is me. He
Yep.
always pay attention. He always writing it to expose
Yeah.
himself.
And there's one thing that I remember, I think it was Judah Smith. Every once in a while, I reference like these pastors who I don't listen to anymore, but like they've said things years ago that still resonate with me. And he said, one of the things that's so beautiful about the book of John is you realize that John never focuses, he doesn't write it from the perspective of his love for God. He writes from the perspective of God's love for him. He really is. He's like, I am the one whom Jesus loved. Like the emphasis is Jesus's love for me defines who I am as a person. That's a really beautiful thing, which is why, yes, we can laugh a little bit about how it might seem and sound arrogant. It's not arrogant. It really just is this moment of genuineness of like, I am defined not by who I am defined by the one who loves me. And that is the thing that matters the most. And so here's my overarching finishing idea, and then we can ask some questions. John wrote last. He wrote after Matthew, Mark, and Luke, okay? He knew that the other gospels existed. He chose not to repeat a majority of them. He sat with right around, 60 years, right, Pastor Patrick? 60 years of preaching, of meditation, of defending of the faith, of
John.
all this comment. 60?
John, right? You're
Yeah.
talking about John.
Yeah.
Because he's gonna write
60 years he sat with all the, from when it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He writes 80 to 90.
That's what it is, about 60 years. And what he distilled about this, if you were oversimplifying the book of John, is that Jesus is not just a fulfillment of Israel's story and God's promise to the Israelites. He is the ground reality of everything. Everything that exists is because of him. The Logos, through whom everything was made, who goes on to become flesh, who died, who rose, and who is making all things new even right now. So he's presently alive. John's gospel doesn't end with the Great Commission like Matthew's does, which is interesting. But it ends with Peter on the beach being asked the question, do you love me 3 times? Because after everything, right? After all the theology, after all the signs, after all the discourse, that's what it comes down to. It's not about how much you know about Jesus. It's whether or not you love him and you know that he loves you, So I think it's a really poetic way to end the book of John. The emphasis after everything that he writes is, it almost leaves you with this understanding of you're kind of asking yourself, like, do I love Jesus? And if so, all of this makes sense. You know what I mean? So that is a very overarching, over summarized book of John. Any questions? Any questions to add? Any comments to unpack over the last one? If you have one, you can ask.
Yeah, maybe after because it's a long question.
Okay.
Yeah. It's about because we were talking about like the women, like I guess Mary Magdalene and like something about like women in ministry, and I guess the question Like I said, I really didn't grow up in church, but like I've noticed, from where I've been studying, is that like a lot of churches don't have like women, like, I guess depending on what they believe in the denomination.
Yeah.
They don't, I want to know like specifically why they, you know what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying. Yeah, but from like a leadership perspective. So yeah. I mean, I can 100%. We can spend some time after this and answer. We're gonna even talk. Well, actually, I have a put a bullet point in that for a second. Any other questions on the Book of John? Any ideas? No. Perfect. So next week is our buffer week. Next week is the week where we just come in and we ask questions. So we will start with that one, which will be good.
So I'll do- And I work with 7 to 8 people, so-
I'm heartbroken. Anyways. No, I can give you a quick summary, but next week, the goal is we come in with questions. There's no agenda. We're just going to talk, let the conversation flow. Okay, fine. I'll unpack it next week too. But last time was funny because we got into prophetic gifts and also, okay, one question before we leave. We have to ask a genuine question here. We are going to be running the evangelism class on Sunday mornings. There's 2 ways that we can do this. I want to ask you guys because I know the group of people in here, you like your Bible study sort of things. Option 1 is we forego any Bible teaching. And if you guys want, you guys can just jump into evangelism for about 4 to 5 weeks. Option 2 is we can run evangelism at the same time as a Bible study if you're saying, hey, I'd rather just sit in a Bible study class. So my question is for everyone in this room, this is not like a bad judgmental thing. Show of hands, would any of you guys want to join baptism class? If you want to just show of hands just so I can give a gauge of evangelism class. Sorry. What? Nah, let me repeat that. We're going to run an evangelism class, okay? Option 1 is we just run the evangelism class and all of you guys can just jump into that for a few weeks. Option 2, we run the evangelism class and then we run another Bible study at the same time so you guys can sit into a Bible study. So show of hands, who here would be willing to do evangelism for 4 weeks? Yeah, so it's the majority of the class. Yeah, cool. So if that's the case, we will, after the buffer week, we'll do evangelism for 4 Sundays?
I think so.
4 Sundays, and then we will continue right back into, maybe we'll do Old Testament prophets or something like that. Cool? Perfect? Awesome. Buffer week next week. Be here.